Buried between Manhattan cliffs, on a field never meant for the baseball, the strangest ballpark in history rose from ashes. Then it warped the game forever. The Polo Grounds had foul lines shorter than your driveway, a center field stretching nearly 500 feet, and an outfield shaped like a horseshoe. Built in desperation, reborn in crisis, it survived fire, baffled fans, and witnessed miracles. Yet its secrets begin not with the heroes, but with the impossible ground beneath their feet. So how did this misfit stadium endure? And could it ever happen again? Long before the crack of a bat echoed through its stands, the ground that would become the Polo Grounds was shaped by forces far older than baseball. The story begins with the city itself, and with a hollow cut into Manhattan long before anyone dreamed of a diamond. In Upper Manhattan, a deep sunken valley known as Coogan's Hollow carved a pocket out of the city's rigid grid. The hollow sat like a bowl between cliffs and rail lines, a geography that refused to be tamed. On one side, sheer cliffs rose up, Coogan's Bluff, while on the other, the Harlem River and tangled train lines hemmed in the land. In 1876, this hollow first hosted polo matches, and the name Polo Grounds stuck. The word grounds followed the British tradition for sporting fields. But few could have guessed what would come next. When city growth pushed the Giants from their original home near Central Park, owner John B. Day faced a harsh reality. There was nowhere left to go except the hollow. In 1889, the team moved in out of necessity, not ambition. The land was uneven, the boundaries dictated by stone and steel, not by any blueprint. The field that took shape in Coogan's Hollow was unlike anything in the sport. The cliffs pressed down in from the west, the river blocked expansion to the east, and railroad tracks sliced along the northern edge. There was no room for symmetry or standard dimensions. The shape of the park was set by geology and city boundaries, not by the rules of the game. From the start, the Giants played within those tight, irregular lines. Every corner of the field owed its existence to the stubborn landscape. The horseshoe layout was not a designer's whim. It was the only shape that fit. The park's future oddities were literally set in stone by the cliffs and the hollow that surrounded it. As the city grew up around the site, the Polo Grounds remained boxed in, its fate sealed by the shape of the earth itself. The ballpark's story would always be defined by the ground beneath it. A field forced to adapt, never to conform. In the early hours of April 14, 1911, flames tore through the Polo Grounds. The fire started quietly, but within minutes, the wooden grandstand was a roaring inferno. Fire department logs from that morning record engines, racing through Harlem's narrow streets, alarms ringing before dawn. By sunrise, nothing remained but twisted steel uprights and scorched earth. The outfield bleachers and the brick clubhouse survived, but the heart of New York's ballpark was gone. Owner John T. Brush faced a choice: abandon the site or rebuild from the ashes. Within days, he made his decision. There would be a new stadium, and it would rise before the season's end. Brush called in architect Henry Beaumont Hertz and the Osborne Engineering Company, demanding a fireproof design, steel and concrete, not wood. Payroll ledgers and construction blueprints show the scale of the challenge. Over 800 laborers working 3 shifts, 7 days a week. Steel arrived by barge up the Harlem River. Concrete was mixed on site, poured day and night as crews raced the clock. Insurance payments and emergency loans funded the project, but money alone could not buy time. New York's civic leaders pushed city agencies to clear permits and smooth labor disputes. Union objections to the relentless pace faded as the city rallied around the Giants. The team played home games at Hilltop Park, but Brush's eyes stayed fixed on Coogan's Hollow. On June 28th, just 75 days after the fire, the Giants returned to a stadium still smelling of wet cement. 16,000 seats were ready for fans that day. By autumn, more than 30,000 could fill the double-deck grandstand. and the new Polo Grounds hosted the World Series. The stadium's footprint, dictated by the stubborn cliffs and city lines, remained, but now the structure was stronger, stranger, and built to endure. The feverish rebuild left its mark. The odd horseshoe shape became permanent, with narrow corners and a yawning gulf in center field. The concrete and steel grandstands set a new standard for ballparks, but the Polo Grounds quirks would only grow more pronounced. The disaster of 1911 and the sprint to rebuild fixed the park's weirdness in place for generations. Measured from home plate, the Polo Grounds defied every expectation of what a baseball field should look like. Down the left field line, the fence stood just 279 feet away, a distance that, by modern standards, belongs in Little League, not the major leagues. Right field was even shorter at 258 feet, at a number so small that it reads like a misprint in the record books. But then, straight out to center, the field stretched to an astonishing 483 feet. That was farther than any other park in baseball history, a chasm that seemed to swallow baseball's whole. These numbers were not the result of design. They were the ransom paid to geography. The cliffs of Coogan's Bluff pressed in from one side, while the Harlem River and its train tracks cut off any hope of a symmetrical layout. The only way to fit a full diamond into the hollow was to squeeze the corners and let center field run wild. The result was a playing surface shaped like a bathtub, with short, boxy corners and a deep, yawning gulf in the middle. For hitters, the field was a paradox. A routine fly ball that hugged the foul line could sneak over the fence for an easy home run, but a ball hit on a line to center, crushed by any other measure, would almost always die in the vast expanse, landing harmlessly in a fielder's glove or bouncing off the distant wall. In most parks, the power alleys, left center and right center, offer a fair shot at a home run. At the Polo Grounds, those alleys were graveyards. Statisticians later estimated that dozens of home runs per year were lost to the endless center field, while pull hitters racked up cheap home runs in the corners. The park's odd shape did not just change the numbers on the scoreboard, it forced a new kind of game. Outfielders had to cover more ground than anywhere else in baseball, racing into the void of center or playing the caroms off sharp, angled walls. Pitchers learned to fear left-handed sluggers who could loft a ball over the short right field, but they also knew that a deep drive to center was almost always safe. The Polo Grounds became a living experiment in geometry, a place where the laws of baseball bent to the will of the land. Aerial diagrams and SABR overlays tell the story in stark lines. The foul poles, so close they seemed within reach. The center field wall, so distant it felt imaginary. No other park in the major leagues ever matched this combination of extremes. The Polo Grounds did not just break the rules, it made its own, one dimension at a time. October 3rd, 1951, the Giants trailed the Dodgers in the bottom of the ninth, pennant hopes hanging by a thread. Bobby Thompson stepped to the plate, tension crackling through the Polo Grounds. Ralph Branca's fastball came in high. Thompson swung. The ball shot toward left, a low line drive, too flat for most parks, but here the wall loomed close. In a blink, the ball cleared the fence by a whisper, disappearing into a sea of hands. Pandemonium erupted. Russ Hodges' radio call echoed over the city. The Giants win the pennant. That home run, forever called the shot heard round the world, owed everything to the Polo Grounds' tight left field. In another stadium, it is a double off the wall. In New York, it became legend. September 29th, 1954. Game 1 of the World Series. The score tied, runners on base. Vic Wertz of the Indians crushed a ball to dead center. Willie Mays turned and sprinted straight into the Polo Grounds' endless outfield. The ball soared more than 420 feet, heading for a place where in any other park it might have cleared the fence. But at the Polo Grounds, the wall waited far in the distance. Mays never slowed. Over his shoulder, he reached up, glove outstretched, and snared the ball in full stride. The catch froze the runners, changed the inning, and sent a shockwave through the baseball. That moment became the catch. Only at the Polo Grounds could a center fielder run that far and still have room to make history. Long before Mays and Thompson, a young Babe Ruth found his power in these odd dimensions. Between 1918 and 1920, Ruth launched some of his earliest home runs over the short right field. The fence beckoned to left-handed hitters, and Ruth answered. Each shot sailed into the crowd, feeding the myth of the home run king. The Polo Grounds gave Ruth a stage for his transformation, turning routine fly balls into milestones. Those early blasts helped shape the legend that would follow him to Yankee Stadium and beyond. Ruth. For every player, the Polo Grounds was a stage where the impossible suddenly seemed likely. Its quirks did not just bend the game, they made moments that still pulse through baseball's veins. A home run that just clears a low wall, a sprinting catch in a canyon of outfield, a young slugger discovering his swing. Each play, each gasp carried the stamp of a ballpark that refused to play by the rules. In the Polo Grounds, geometry became destiny, and ordinary games became unforgettable. On any given summer day, the Polo Grounds pulsed with a kind of organized chaos that no other stadium could match. The Giants may have been the main attraction, but they were hardly ever alone. From 1913 to 1922, the Yankees made the park their home, bringing with them the thunder of Babe Ruth's bat and crowds that sometimes outnumbered the Giants' own faithful. The uneasy partnership festered behind the scenes. Giants manager John McGraw bristled at the Yankees' rising popularity, and scheduling ledgers from the era show weeks packed with double bookings, hurried field conversions, and a constant scramble for locker space. Mayhem didn't end with baseball. By 1925, the New York Giants of the NFL took up residence, turning the outfield into a gridiron each autumn. Sundays brought a new wave of fans, and the field itself bore scars from cleats and goalposts, while groundskeepers hustled to erase the lines before the next baseball game. Press reports from the 1930s describe weekends when the Polo Grounds hosted baseball, football, and even boxing matches in the span of 48 hours. When the Yankees finally built their own stadium in 1923, the Polo Grounds returned to a single baseball tenant, at least for a while, but the pattern of shared space continued. In 1962, the expansion Mets arrived, inheriting not just the field, but the quirks and headaches that came with it. Rookie players found themselves dressing in cramped, partitioned clubhouses, their lockers wedged beside those of visiting teams and grounds crew. All the while, the neighborhood outside found ways to join the spectacle. The stadium's sunken bowl meant that ticketless fans could watch from the heights of Coogan's Bluff, perched on stone walls or rooftop ledges. Archival crowd photos reveal hundreds of spectators lining the cliffs, peering into the action for free. Oral histories recall kids shimmying up telephone poles or sneaking onto rooftops to catch a glimpse, and sometimes a stray home run ball rolling down the hill. The Polo Grounds belonged to the city, not just the teams. Every game was a negotiation between rivals, a juggling act for stadium staff, and a street festival for the fans above and beyond the gates. Horace Stoneham sat in his office in the spring of 1957, surrounded by city inspection reports and financial projections that painted a bleak picture. The Polo Grounds, once the pride of New York baseball, was falling apart. Rust crept along the steel supports, the stairways splintered, and seats rotted in the shadows of Coogan's Bluff. Attendance had plummeted as the neighborhood changed and city officials pressed for urgent repairs the club could no longer afford. Stoneham weighed the cost of renovation against the reality of shrinking crowds and a city unwilling to subsidize a new stadium. In May, he made his decision public. The Giants would leave New York for San Francisco. The announcement landed like a thunderclap. Local editorials mourned the loss, while the city council minutes recorded both regret and resignation. Stoneham's own words in the New York Times were blunt. We felt we had no alternative. The Polo Grounds lingered for a few more years, hosting the expansion Mets and the last echoes of big league baseball in Harlem. But the park's fate was sealed. By 1963, the city condemned the structure. Demolition permits were filed, and in April 1964, wrecking crews arrived with steel jaws and swinging balls. Newsreels captured the collapse of the grandstands, concrete and memory tumbling into dust. Children scavenged bricks and seat numbers, pocketing fragments of a vanished world. The site did not stay empty for long. The Polo Grounds towers rose in its place, a public housing complex whose courtyard still traces the faint outline of the old diamond. Stand in the center, and the ghosts of home plate and the pitcher's mound linger beneath your feet. A silent reminder of a ballpark erased, but never quite forgotten. Today, the Polo Grounds exists only in memory and faded photographs, yet its warped design still sparks debate about tradition versus innovation in sports. As new stadiums chase perfection, the Polo Grounds reminds us greatness sometimes emerges from the improbable. In a city that erases its past quickly, a ghostly diamond endures, proof that what's lost can still shape the game we play now.